the Daily Wire bros be like, this is a Christian story. This is a Christian story. And you think so?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Johnny Bravo is not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most profound Christian novels written in the 20th century was A Clockwork Orange by Burgess. The protagonist of that story is a Christ figure.
There were too many A-list actors in this.
One of the things we're seeing in the Odyssey is a bit of a theodicy. Sorry for the wordplay there. That wasn't intentional.
No, it was good. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's
That's really nice. People talk a lot about the accessibility of art. And I think that means two things. Like, obviously, art should be accessible monetarily, all of these other things. But
wait, how do I non-binary you?
That's a good question.
Mixter.
Mixed. I'm a mystery. I talk about Pope's Odyssey the same way people talk about Dr. House, where I'm like, I don't agree with your methods, but God damn it, do you get results?
Sinon not necessarily being a part of the Odyssey. And then something that you had said, Chris, is that Sinon actually takes on some of the characteristics of Achilles in the underworld.
Structurally.
Were you alive for 9/11?
I was alive for 4 months.
Okay, all right. He's legal.
I just made it. For me, still, this most striking moment is when Lupita Nyong'o turned her face and we saw those scars.
It took me. That seems to be a very common thing that has jarred a lot of people.
Dad, I'm sorry. I have to come out to you, and then they just do a money spread.
Oh, God.
What was your guys' final scores?
I give it a 4
out of 10.
Hi, I'm Zephyr Caulfield. I'm an actor, filmmaker, and content creator, and you can find me anywhere under Zephyr_core.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Briggs. You can find me by searching Andrew Briggs anywhere.
I'm C.V. Robertson. I've been writing about Homer since 2021. I'm currently teaching 2 courses on Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. You can find me basically anywhere. Instagram, Substack at Caffeine and Philosophy.
I think we all kind of went into the Odyssey with like a certain expectation. It was about what I thought it would be, which a lot of people were upset with me about because they're like, you gave it way too high of a rating when it sounds like you hated it. And I'm like, no, I personally am not like, I'm not like an Odyssey purist or anything like that. I don't have like a really, really strong attachment to the story. So I kind of went into it with, I'm going to watch this as just a movie, as very specifically Christopher Nolan's Odyssey instead of the Odyssey by Homer, you know? So it was like, I was a little more disconnected from it. I was easier to please despite like the various pieces that I didn't like about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that's the same mentality I came into it with as well. It's like, obviously this is not, as far as adaptations go film wise, like it was lacking, you know, like but it is like for what Christopher Nolan was trying to do. I think it did a really good job at that.
My feeling is that it was, in concept, borderline brilliant, but in execution, it just didn't quite work. There are so many things. So first of all, I went into the theater like with my radar set on like any Emily Wilson influence, because there have been all these conversations over the last 6 months about being inspired by Emily Wilson, and now we've seen Emily Wilson herself come out with very heavy criticisms of the film. And the rumor I've heard, which is maybe related to the film, is that she has announced she is apparently doing a second translation of the Odyssey.
Whoa.
Where she will not be limiting herself to the original number of lines. So it's going to be a little bit longer, a little bit more like Fagles, perhaps. Which I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of excited for. I have been very heavily criticizing Emily Wilson and her translation of the Odyssey online on Instagram and stuff, because she does mislead a lot of first-time readers on their impression of Odysseus and Telemachus and some of the language there. That said, I've heard nothing but good things about her translation of the Iliad, and she's clearly qualified and competent to do this. And what's most fascinating is that she definitely brought her feminist thinking into her translation of the Odyssey. But what's fascinating, if you listen to her interviews, is she appears to be extremely irritated that she is persistently referred to as the female translator and as the feminist translator. She's like, why can't I just be a classicist? And
which is fair.
Yeah.
And I think I wonder, my cautiously optimistic hope is that she will maybe be setting aside some of the interpretations she had of the characters, which are totally valid, but it's not necessarily valid to put those into the language of the text when the text is somewhat ambiguous, and maybe trying to take some of Professor Richard Whitaker's criticisms in hand and put out something a little bit more scholarly precise, but with her writing skill that she brought to her first translation. That's a side note. It was just amusing to see her criticism of the Nolan's Odyssey, and to imagine maybe seeing the film inspired her to do a second one.
Yeah. She hated it so much. She's like, I gotta do the crack.
I think she's not doing it fair enough, though. So anyways, many people, especially on the political right, were insisting not only was her influence on the movie obvious, but anybody who was denying her influence on the film was being disingenuous. I went in there having read her translation, and not only did I not see any of her influence, I saw in many cases the opposite. Like, whereas she depicts Odysseus as the Lord of Lies, Matt Damon's Odysseus is like a straight shooter. Like, he doesn't even like to deceive animals. He is forced to create like one grand deception, but like, it's a very different character, and it's the opposite direction. I mean, Christopher Nolan's suitors are very clearly bad guys. Melantho is not some agency-less slave. She's clearly an actor. It's and the things that people were complaining about with like Circe and Penelope's sort of feminist feeling, like, that's not from Wilson. That's Nolan's own thing. So I was initially impressed by that. And then, like, the more I thought about what Nolan did with this idea of Zenia, at the risk of maybe confusing people, Zenia is a persistent theme, not the central theme, but a very big theme in Homer's Odyssey of this right ritual guest host relationship. It's very kind of idiosyncratic, and it's very ritualized. It's very theological in justification. And I was initially impressed that Nolan homed in on that at all, which maybe shows how low my expectations were.
Some would argue he honed in on it a little too much. Jesus.
Wilson described him as being like obsessed with it. But
it was like every other line.
But what was interesting is he actually transformed it. He starts off with something like Homer's idea of Zenia, which is this very sort of divine command theory based rule of custom as far as how you're supposed to treat guests and how guests are supposed to treat hosts. And it is a reciprocal thing. But he turns it into this kind of deontological global golden rule thing, which is not what Zenia was at all. And the thing that was, I mean, I'll get to my other feelings that I've come to about it, but I guess there's a lot of aspects to this film. There's a lot that was going on with the film.
The Zenia thing has been really interesting to me for seeing how people are interpreting it and applying it to the real world, you know, where it's kind of become this new, like, oh, just be like perfectly kind and perfectly welcoming and perfectly understanding and almost over the top, where there's no like asterisk that is meant to go to it. As you said, the reciprocal nature of it. It's been interesting to see people applying that to the modern day without that reciprocity angle attached to it.
Yeah. I saw a tweet the other day that was like, taking my bro's last beer because it's Zeus's law, you know, like, and that's just like, that's how it's being interpreted.
Yeah.
That's actually hilarious. Yeah.
That is funny. Cause like the justification, Nolan actually puts the correct justification in like the first minute of the film. It's like, oh, it's because any of these people could be a god, or just more generally, you don't know who they are. But then, like, the strange, ambiguous absence of the gods. It's not like they're totally absent. It's not like Troy level absence. But the existence of the gods is ambiguous. And at some points there is towards the end, there's almost a Nietzschean death of God moment where he talks about, like, we killed the gods by betraying Zeus's law, as if the gods were only the law. And I was actually very jarred when Mentor died, because I didn't realize that the trick that Nolan was doing and having Telemachus say like, "Oh, you have Athena's eyes or something." I'm like, okay, this is him including Athena here. And then Mentor just dies. And it's like, oh, I guess not.
I think that also feels like a really funny in joke, because there's like, I don't know if this was intentional, but how I read it is like, when I sat back and I'm like, oh yeah, the mentor has to die. That's the trope. That's like the funny little thing that they were going for. But no, I think you're absolutely right when we're talking about like the gods being absent. And I thought that was really interesting. I know to bring it back to Wilson, I know that she spoke about that. Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can try and cite my source here. But yeah, she Ooh. Oh yes. One of my she says, one of my favorite moments was when Zendaya assures Damon that gods are not hard for mortals to understand. Yet there are no gods, and yet shipwrecks and death are presented as the inevitable consequence of blinding the son of Poseidon. Nolan's version of the world is not big enough to include either real gods or real people who might be different from us. And I really took issue with that criticism, because I really kind of enjoyed the sort of nebulous nature of these gods. Like the question of if Zendaya as Athena at the end, it was even Athena at all. Was she Athena, or was she just Odysseus's guilt haunting him? Was this
or
who he? Yeah, right.
Or maybe both at the same time.
Absolutely.
Dude, when Chris and I left the theater, he was like, "Did you feel the presence of the gods?" And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
And that was really, because even with Zendaya like very explicitly being right there, next to him in all these different scenes, it kind of just felt like there's someone kind of like floating around, sitting on his shoulder, but it didn't feel like there was any like godly power being shown. Even the stuff with Poseidon, it was like, okay, yeah, like, the storms happen, or like Chris, as you pointed out in the beginning, you hear Zeus's thunder periodically pop up, but like it really did feel like there was a major absence of the gods. And I don't think that ruined the movie necessarily, but I mean, had Chris not brought that up, I don't think it would have like registered outside of Zendaya kind of just feeling like a person who's like hoofing around with him.
Well, I asked that because I had heard some of the early critics say that the gods were totally absent, which like was leveled at Nolan, but kind of like people still enjoyed Troy, which is even further from the Iliad than Nolan's Odyssey is from the Odyssey, although there's a similarity in spirit and theme there. So, but I thought the ambiguity was actually kind of worked for me.
I think so too.
I enjoyed the question mark applies to their absence as well as to their presence, and I thought the thunderbolt right after Odysseus strung his bow and twanged it was like a double signal of now you're all going to die, because the twanging of the bow is like I'm on the hunt now, and the thunder strike is like Zeus's clap of approval almost. I don't know. There's a lot of subtlety in Nolan's film work that might have been too subtle to be picked up on consciously. Like I didn't notice this, but a few other people pointed out that the color palette that Nolan shows was different for every island. Like he was, and Emily Wilson complained that this world is not big enough for a variety of different people who don't think the way we do. It's like, well, maybe his technique failed, but he did employ some techniques to try to create that sense of a world. I think he homogenized the boat and homogenized the people a little bit too much. And I get what people are talking about. I think he went from being a Greek world to essentially like central modern London casting. And it felt that way.
With American accents.
With American accents. And there were too many celebrities.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that was intentional. Because there's all this talk about the race swapping, and like that was bothersome, but to be honest, Lupita was as bothersome as Lupita was, and Travis Scott, they were less bothersome than John Bernthal.
John Bernthal was so fucking out of place.
So out of place.
Oh my God.
And it made me wonder, like, Nolan like has a sense of the effects. Why is he doing this? And it was in thinking about Cersei that I wondered, is he trying to depict a corrupted world, or a world that has been changed from the story, like doing some like 160 IQ meta thing where like the world is changed because of this deception? If so, it's, I think, half a step too clever, and it doesn't quite work, but I could at least see the idea behind something like that.
For me, I think, I think this ambiguousness of, of the gods and the world is all like that. I think it is, and it sort of ties back to the point of like too many celebrities and things like that as well. Like this, it made it feel very, very modern, right? Like this is not a retelling of the Odyssey in attempts to like preserve its story. It's like, hey, this is how the Odyssey is affected in our more like everyday lives. And I think
that is the one thing that Emily Wilson provided, that he was inspired by. At the beginning of her where's it, translation, she says, I believe it's "Tell the old story for our modern times" is the line, if I remember correctly. I can double check that real quick. Tell the old story for our modern times. Find the beginning. So that, and I think that was what he did.
And I think that's where I think the brilliance of this lies. Like you were saying, like conceptually, it is brilliant. And I think I agree, like the sort of ambiguity of the god speaks to the ambiguity of the morality of his actions. Is he doing the right thing? Has he been deluding himself into thinking that he's doing the right thing? And then they have, while there is this ambiguity of whether or not he was on the right path or like doing these things for the right reasons, we are seeing the real people that are hurt along the way, in the men that he has on the ship with him, in the way that Cersei reacts to these sailors, and the way that, God, for me, still this most striking moment is when Lupita Nyong'o turned her face and we saw those scars on her face.
Took me that seems to be a very common thing that has jarred a lot of people, and it took me a while to realize what he was doing in that scene. This is one of the few things I think he did that was not just clever, but also worked. Because I think, again, the concept of this film was brilliant, but like James Joyce's Ulysses, brilliant, but kind of doesn't work.
I have such a hate boner for James Joyce. It's insane.
No, he's he's the
literary equivalent of a hot girl that knows she's hot. You know what I mean? Joyce, you're so smart. I get it. Shut up.
Yeah. But one of the big themes in the Odyssey, in Homer's Odyssey, is forgetting. And this is a sort of yin and yang paired theme with the theme of memory that we see in the Iliad. The idea of the Iliad, arguably, is the aspiration for heroic immortalization, to achieve one's kleon aphthiton, this unwilting glory or immortal glory, to be remembered in song and poetry. What Odysseus is doing in trying to get home, many of his challenges that he faces along the way are invitations to heroic immortalization that he has to turn aside. The Cyclops is in many ways a symbolic embodiment of heroism itself. His name means many stories, Polyphemus. He is, at the very end of the Odyssey, actually, in book 24, Agamemnon is speaking to Achilles and describes him as so huge in your hugeness, or as Naj translates it, or lying there in the dust, dead. The heroes were larger than life characters. And here's this Cyclops with this single-minded focus that devours and destroys men, like the men alluded to in the beginning of the Iliad. Yeah. And so you have this focus on memory that causes death. And so what is Odysseus trying to do? He's trying to forget. He's trying to forget. And I think there's actually a justification in Odysseus's many almost Joker-like stories. Every story he gives about his own account is different, to Eumaeus, to Penelope, to his father Laertes, to the Phaeacians. All of his accounts are different. And what that does is it prevents the narrator from being able to tell us precisely who he is and what he did. And in this way, he escapes the danger of memory. And this is, of course, it's opened thematically by the Odyssey not even mentioning Odysseus's name for the first 20 lines, which is a huge structural omission for epic poetry. And then at the very end, you have this ecclesin, this ecclesia, this forgetfulness that Zeus and Athena mentioned. But with the film, everything focuses on remembering. And I think Lupita Nyong'o's scars are a visual, you can't forget that.
Yeah.
It's something you can't forget. Whereas in the Odyssey, Helen is feeding everyone drugs that make them forget all their sorrows. And here, instead, she's reminding John Bernthal, remember what your brother did, and remember what happened to him, and remember this, remember that, remember this. It's all about remembering rather than forgetting. So we're almost bringing Iliadic themes into the Odyssey and rejecting the Odyssey themes from the Odyssey. And I think that's why so many people feel like said it felt Christian, because Christianity.
I was just going to bring that up. That is like, it's been really interesting seeing in particular like the Daily Wire bros be like, this is a Christian story. This is a Christian story. And you think so?
Yeah. Interesting.
The Trojan horse serves as an original sin, essentially, that turns the whole world into this post-lapsarian fallen state. It has become corrupted, and that's why it's lost its color. That's why none of the characters are quite right. I think it is probably not knowingly, probably not intentionally, but at a subconscious level, it absolutely is a Christian film.
Is it subconscious, or is it just that it can be interpreted in that sense to like make more sense of it for the onlooker in this case?
Well, I think these filmmakers design them as best as they can, if they're doing their job well, such that the audience can read many different interpretations into it. Right. But insofar as the theme is memory and honoring the dead and recognizing our original sin in this way, it really maps onto Christianity and Christian morality very well. I heard one film critic, a number of people have come out saying the film is kind of anti-male, which I don't quite agree with, but I can see it. But one critic was saying it's kind of anti-human more broadly.
I can agree with that for sure.
And that I think is true. And also it's technically blasphemy. It's technically not correct, but there is an anti-human spirit to Christianity. So I think with this idea of the fall, no one is good, not one, no one does good. Everyone is deceptive. You can read Circe's complaints as complaints about men. And so many people have tried to make Circe a feminist figure, but there's so many little things that Nolan does that change the intuitive interpretation. I didn't see her as a feminist character, and all she had to do was turn her sister into a crow. And you're like, oh, you feel this way about everybody.
I think, to expand on that, like of whether or not it's like an anti-male or like an anti, human story, I think it speaks to, like, for me, I think instead of reading it as like a Christian thing, I read it as a sort of condemnation of where we are, like what we as like human beings have done, especially coming right off the heels of Oppenheimer, right? It's like this is a thing that talks about war. And like the way that Western civilization, specifically America, has like used, its influence and power to do these things. And it's reckoning with the fact that Nolan, as a very wealthy man in the Western world, is living on he is Odysseus, right? He is living a living proof of like sitting atop this hoard of gold that is Western society that he has benefited from by trampling under the people that got there. I think for the horse specifically at the end of it all represents like his biggest shame. It is the bomb for Oppenheimer in the same way. Like this was his idea, this thing that was the biggest sin for him, right, that caused all these things, and it stays in his mind. You know, he in Sinon, right, like he had to destroy this. He had led this person, he deceived this person that he was close to from his homeland. You know, they did these awful things. He watched his men carry these people away into the shadows. And, you know, then when Cersei comes back and she's like, you know, these men, you think these men did that because you told them to? I thought that was really striking for me. I thought the whole Cersei thing where I thought the sequence of her crafting these men into the pigs was absolutely bone chilling. It was so
The
good.
visuals were unreal.
That was the best part of the film, I thought.
Yeah. And the fact when she puts them back and just like put on your disguise was so good. I'm like, this whole thing was a condemnation of like, we as people in Western society are all in our own way Odysseus's. Specifically as like, I guess that's maybe where the men presenting angle of it as well would be seen as well, because like there is that sort of that imbalance to it as well.
But Odysseus himself is not Odysseus, as Emily Wilson pointed out, which is funny. And I actually didn't. Odysseus. I was really on the lookout for like Odysseus being blamed or held as blameworthy, because one of the things Wilson does in the opening of her translations, one of the very subtle things she does is she says he failed, and for their own mistakes they died, which very lightly and breezily glosses over the very emphatic language in the Greek that says, no, these guys were the ones that failed themselves. Their own recklessness, their heedlessness caused these idiots, these nepioi, to destroy themselves. The blind fools, as Fagles translates them. They devoured the cattle of the sun and so forth. And then we're treated to this diatribe from Zeus about these mortals always blaming the gods for their own troubles when they themselves compound their suffering beyond its proper share. And yet many of these classicists, including Wilson, and also my ideal adversary, because I respect him a lot, Joel Christensen, likes to hold Odysseus to a standard of responsibility that Zeus himself rejects. Zeus says, I'm not responsible for these people who bring suffering on themselves. Yet Nolan is saying, no, not only is Odysseus responsible for the death of his men, which is the Christensen and the Wilson argument, he's responsible for the death of the world, which is like, wow, that's like putting him at the level of a god. And it's just the anti-humanism in the standard there, which I think is symptom of deontological reasoning. But it's also not just anti-human, but anti-life in a way, in that all life comes from death. And to condemn things for killing other people or for taking over land or whatever is a condemnation of all life. You know, even the deer eat grass and kill our blackberries and apples and stuff. And there's that famous opening line from Last of the Mohicans, where the half-white guy and the Native American are sitting there talking. It's like, oh, you came and conquered us. And the white guy's like, oh, you conquered the people who were there before you. And the Indian's like, yeah, but you did it with alcohol, which is shameful. And the white guy's like, fair enough. You know, there is a history of conquest, and the conquerors will at some point down the road be conquered in turn. And the world keeps turning. There is the potential, and I think Nolan actually started to do this very well in addressing the greatest evil of the ancient era, which was the blood feud. And I thought his self-exile solution was actually very clever, and that could have been made really, really good and really, really insightful, except it didn't take the initial problem of the blood feud seriously enough, because he treated Agamemnon's aggression as this sort of ex nihilo invasion. You know, he completely glossed over Paris taking Helen, any other possibility of of a cycle that precedes the present moment.
And he said, I went as far to say, like, oh, he's doing this, he's utilizing this feud between his brother and as a way to like secure trade routes.
Yes,
which I think was also really interesting.
Another possible explanation, we're all speculating here, but a possible explanation for choosing Lupita Nyong'o, who is the Diane Kruger who played Helen in Troy.
We can get a fact check on that. Hold
Like
on.
like this gorgeous German supermodel person. And Lupita is visually the opposite of that. And I think choosing the opposite in color and appearance and everything, not saying she's not pretty, but like very much the opposite of the normal thing, sort of emphasizes this was never about a woman.
If you've watched this far, you're exactly the kind of person that this show is for. The full episode, plus dozens of hours of exclusive podcasts, videos, vlogs, and our members-only Discord are all available through the members-only section on my main YouTube channel, Andrew Briggs, or on Patreon. The links are below. Here's a preview for the rest of this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the other side.
Nolan's Odysseus is not Homer's Odysseus.
This Odysseus was not complicated insofar as being multifaceted. His grief and his guilt were complicated, but like he himself is just a man dealing with guilt.
There was so much fucking marketing around defy the gods. And then you watch the film, and literally the only defiance of the gods is him trying to save his men.
Understanding the limits of translation is tough because you don't really know what the limitations are and what something has and what it's missing until you've kind of poked through a couple of them, unless you look beforehand to try to assess others. But you don't know it experientially until you go through it.
But so Nietzsche in particular is interesting. I was as prepared to be upset about Paige's casting as I was to be upset about Lupita's casting. And like the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, okay, in some ways it's not ideal, but in some ways it works very well.
I locked in on the "we're Greeks" line when looking at, I cannot remember his name, but it was like, it's an Indian guy saying we're Greeks, and he's got a Korean dude in the boat behind him.
Brad Pitt is of course not Greek, but the ancient Greeks are also not Greek in the modern sense too.
I think she also like implied being upset that there was no sex scene between the two of them, and I'm just like, I don't understand what you want. I don't understand what you like, because for me that was such a striking scene. I think that was done so well, and yeah, he seemed like someone who had this like bright-eyed trust in Odysseus the whole time that like really hammered home Odysseus's guilt.
Because if you, like Emily Wilson, try to appreciate this story as a faithful adaptation of Homer's Odyssey, you are going to be very disappointed.